Let me tell you about this movie called Love Tactics. It's about a playboy and a blogger girl who both don't believe in love until they make a bet with their friends that they can make each other fall in love. Will they realize their true feelings before it's too late? Let's find out. The story starts with Asli, who's a blogger and works in fashion. She writes about how women find comfort in men, but guys are different. They're always searching for something more. That day, she showed her designs to an important client, and it went super well. Then we meet Kerem, who works in interior design. He tells a client that women are really particular and want everything perfect. His advice on wall paint impresses the client, so they love him. Meanwhile, Asli's friend is upset because she went on a date, got intimate with someone, but he didn't call her after. She tried calling him 1,000,000 times, but no answer. Asli told her, "You messed up by moving too fast. If you reach out too much, he'll think you're needy and stop responding." To prove her point, Asli decided to take on a challenge, find a playboy and make him fall in love with her. She promised to keep everyone updated on her progress. On the other side, Kerem's boss wasn't happy with his quirky way of talking to clients. The boss took away his campaign, which made Kerem feel off. He went to his friend, who was also upset because he just got dumped. His friend said, "You'll never understand love because you never stay with a girl for more than one night." Kerem challenged him back, saying, "I get girls. I know how to handle them." And guess what? Kerem also bet that he could find a girl and make her fall in love with him. Meanwhile, Asli believed men were simple and just needed to be trained. Kerem thought women were too picky and said, "For women, we're like products. We need to present ourselves right." One night, everyone went to a club. Kerem's friend picked Asli as his target, and Asli's friend picked Kerem. The game begins here. Kerem doesn't approach Asli immediately. She walks by him and heads to the bar. A guy starts chatting her up there, but she isn't interested. The guy gets clingy, so Kerem steps in and pretends they're a couple. He introduces himself to her, and Asli says, "I should go back to my friend." Kerem steps in and says, "That guy's still watching you. You should spend a little more time with me." He introduces her to his friends, and after a quick chat, Asli decides it's time to head out. Kerem's friends joke that she'll be tough to crack, and Kerem just smirks, clearly up for the challenge. Meanwhile, Asli's friend spots Kerem's friend and seems immediately interested. Before long, they are dancing together, totally into each other. But when it's time to leave the club, Asli's friend tells her, "He's gone now. What are you going to do?" Asli just shrugs and says, "We'll meet again through you." This whole night is part of Asli's plan. She's all about testing her theories on how to control men and make them fall for her. And guess what? Kerem has his own strategy. He's also gathering info on her, thinking she's an easy target because she seems so simple. They're both prepared for their next move, getting Asli's friend to attend a party with Kerem's friend, where Asli will pretend it's all just a coincidence they meet again. But fate has other ideas. Just as things are heating up, Asli's boss asks her to go to an important party. And surprise! Kerem also gets invited to the same event for work. Both of them groan inwardly, thinking they won't get to see each other at all. Little did they know they were heading to the same place. At the party, they are in completely different circles. A woman who knows Kerem's ex-girlfriend starts chatting him up and tells him his ex is there too, and she's missed him a lot. Kerem panics, seeing his ex across the room, and tries to make a quick exit. Meanwhile, Asli accidentally spills her drink on someone, and before she can say oops, she's out of there too. Both leave the venue at the same time, totally coincidentally, and end up in the same cab. Asli says, "Get out of this cab. I need to leave this party immediately." Kerem responds, "I'm in a hurry too. Why don't we share the cab?" And Asli reluctantly agrees. Kerem suggests stopping for dinner at his favorite spot, a fancy restaurant. Asli laughs and asks, "Do you bring every girl here?" She's clearly onto him, knowing he uses these romantic gestures to win women over. As they start dinner, Kerem calls for the wine list. Asli just keeps laughing, saying, "You are so cliché! Do girls really go crazy for all of this?" Kerem feels totally embarrassed but doesn't let it faze him. After dropping her off, Kerem says, "Tonight was amazing." But Asli's not giving him much of her attention. She's plotting her next move, revenge! She intentionally leaves her scarf in the cab, thinking Kerem will come back to return it. But Kerem isn't one to play along. He sends the scarf back himself via a delivery guy, feeling pretty satisfied with his little victory. Both spend the day waiting for the other to call, sure that the other is about to give in. It's a classic game of cat and mouse, with these two playing their parts perfectly. The next day, Asli writes on her blog, "I don't like Kerem even a little bit, but for this bet, I have to do all of this." The next morning, they both get a call saying they need to fly to a new city for a client meeting. Both groan in disappointment. Neither wanted to travel again so soon. On the flight, their seats are booked right next to each other. Asli thinks Kerem deliberately booked his seat next to hers to keep an eye on her, which she finds kind of funny. Kerem, on the other hand, assumes Asli followed him by choosing the seat next to him. When they talk about it, Asli says, "There's no man alive for whom I'd chase all the way to the airport." And Kerem laughs, saying, "And I wouldn't do all this for you either." The whole flight passes in misunderstandings. When they land, a car picks them both up. Turns out, neither of them had done anything drastic, like booking the seat or planning the trip, to be together. It's all just coincidence. The client who called them reveals he bought both their agencies and wants to work with them. He seems especially taken with Asli, giving her special attention during meetings. Asli uses this to her advantage, continuing her plan. She writes on her blog, "Jealousy is a strong motivator. If Kerem thinks I like someone else, he'll start chasing me too." So she spends extra time with the client in front of Kerem, making sure he notices. The client introduces Kerim to his daughter and even invites one of Kerem's ex-girlfriends to dinner. He wants her to spend time with Kerem too. During dinner, the client keeps flirting with Asli, which makes her super uncomfortable. But seeing this, Kerem starts to get jealous. Kerem steps in to protect Asli from the overly flirtatious client. He orders a lot of drinks for himself and the client. While the client downs glass after glass, Kerem pretends to drink but secretly pours his drinks on the floor. Eventually, the client gets drunk and starts feeling sick. Kerem says, "We need to leave quickly or we'll just end up taking care of him." And they make a hasty exit. Kerem takes Asli to a very beautiful place, his uncle's house. His uncle is thrilled to meet her because Kerem never brings anyone home. Asli is blown away by how warm and welcoming Kerem's family is. While at the house, she notices a photograph of Kerem with his father from when he was a kid. She asks about his mother, but Kerem gets upset and leaves the room. There's clearly some baggage there that even Asli can't help unpack. Kerem's uncle's wife explains to Asli that Kerem's mother abandoned him when he was very young, which deeply affected him. She adds, "He has never brought any girl here before. You must be very special." Asli feels a connection with Kerem and is curious about his past. Asli follows Kerem to a pottery workshop where he's making beautiful pots. He shows her one and explains that in the past, women used to pour their tears into such pots when their husbands were away. Asli gets emotional but teases him by asking, "Do you bring every girl here? Is this another one of your tricks?" Kerem smiles and replies, "My father taught me pottery. Would you like to try?" As they work together on the pottery wheel, they get closer. Overwhelmed with emotions, Asli steps back and remarks that it's getting very late. Kerem, with a mischievous glint in his eye, says, "At this time, there's only one thing we can do." He blindfolds her and tells her to trust him completely. Kerem then takes her directly to a hot air balloon. Asli is terrified of heights, but trusts Kerem enough to get into the basket. As they ascend, she becomes even more frightened, but Kerem calms her down, saying, "Close your eyes and just breathe with me." His soothing presence eases her fears, and she relaxes. From up high, the view is absolutely breathtaking. Asli thanks him for the incredible evening, feeling a deep connection between them. They return to their rooms, both drawn to each other, but managing to resist any further actions. Back in Kerem's city, his friends notice that he hasn't thought about any other girl since meeting Asli. Meanwhile, Asli writes on her blog, "Kerem isn't as bad as I initially thought. After getting to know him better, I realized he is quite different. One of her blog posts gets a comment. Are you falling in love with him? This upsets Asli, who wasn't ready for such emotions. That night, Kerem messages her asking if they can have dinner together the next night. Asli plans to make him wait, but can't resist replying right away, saying, I would love to. Kerem decides to cook dinner himself. Asli writes in her blog that she's nervous about their upcoming date and wants to keep Kerem waiting for a kiss. She drinks a lot while waiting for him. When Kerem approaches her to offer a drink, Asli thinks he's about to kiss her, but he doesn't. Instead, he teases her by saying, You're drunk enough. A little later, Kerem takes her outside and says, Come with me. He set up a bed in the garden and projected Asli's favorite movie on a big screen. She's surprised he even knows her favorite movie. It's a romantic film. When the hero and heroine kiss in the rain, it suddenly starts raining in their garden too. Kerem had planned every detail. Asli gets emotional watching the movie under the stars, and they share their first kiss. Afterward, things get more intimate between them. While spending time together, Asli asks, Do you do this with every girl? Kerem replies, What are you talking about? Feeling a deeper connection, Asli challenges him to tell her something about himself that he's never shared with anyone else. Kerem opens up to Asli, revealing that the piano downstairs belonged to his mother. He shares, I don't play it because it makes me feel like I might have forgiven her, and yet, deep down, I can't let go of the idea that she might leave me forever. This emotional confession touches Asli deeply, and they have a heartfelt conversation about love, loss, and forgiveness. Later that night, Asli goes downstairs and starts playing the piano. Kerem joins her, and together, they play a beautiful duet. For the first time, the two grow even closer, sharing intimate moments and emotional truths. The next day, Kerem's friends notice a change in him. They ask if something happened between him and Asli, but Kerem remains silent. Similarly, Asli's friends are curious about the growing rumors surrounding their relationship. Asli tells her friends not to talk about it, but they're too excited, especially when she shows them a photo of Kerem. Her friend recognizes him as the guy who had ignored her in the past, and she becomes upset. This upsets Asli, who feels a mix of anger and self-blame for being overconfident in their relationship. Determined to teach Kerem a lesson, Asli meets him for dinner and goes live on her blog. Kerem confesses, Last night was very special to me. I never thought I could fall in love with anyone, but I've fallen in love with you. His heartfelt confession makes her reconsider her plan. But then, Kerem's friend sees the live stream and tries calling him, only for Kerem not to pick up. Asli thanks Kerem for the special night and says, What you did to every girl has now happened to you. She reveals that it had all been part of a challenge, leaving Kerem heartbroken and devastated. Both Kerem and Asli are left feeling miserable in the aftermath. Their playful bet turned into real emotions, and now they're both paying the price. The next day, Asli's boss calls her to his office and fires her without any explanation. Meanwhile, Kerem's ex-girlfriend comes to meet him and says, What happened to you was really unfortunate, but at least now I know that you are capable of loving someone. It will be difficult for you to stay here now, so come with me to London. After what Asli did to you, I've already had her fired. Asli, while packing her belongings, finds the pot Kerem had given her and starts crying. A little later, her boss calls her back and offers her the job again. But Asli refuses, saying, I don't want to work with you anymore. Meanwhile, we see Kerem spending more time with his ex-girlfriend. It turns out she had Asli fired from her office. Now, all of Kerem and Asli's friends come together to support Asli. Kerem's friend explains, His ex-girlfriend had you fired. Kerem is going with her only to make sure you get your job back. They've already left for the airport, so go and stop him. Asli's determination kicks in. One of Kerem's friends, who he had previously hurt, says, I never cared about Kerem, but you love him. You need to chase after him. With this encouragement, all their friends head to the airport together. On the way, they hit a snag. Moving trucks are blocking the road. Asli's friends manage to clear the path by yelling at the truck drivers. Despite their best efforts, traffic slows them down. Spotting a delivery boy nearby, Ashley takes a ride with him and reaches the airport just in time. Her friends even book her a flight ticket. Ashley sprints through the airport, determined to reach Kerem before his plane takes off. But by then, Kerem is already on his flight. On the plane, some girls mention that Ashley has updated her blog. Kerem immediately takes out his phone and reads it. In her post, Ashley writes, "What I did to Kerem was so wrong. People make mistakes in life, but that doesn't mean we should intentionally hurt them like this. I fell in love with him too, but in my desire for revenge, I ended up hurting him. I may never get this chance again." Kerem is deeply moved by her words and immediately gets off the flight. Despite the airport staff trying to stop him, he refuses to listen. Back at the airport, Ashley was supposed to take a later flight, but she forces her way onto the plane where Kerem is. The two spot each other, confess their love, and hug tightly in front of everyone. Just as they're about to say, "I love you," airport police arrest them for causing a disturbance and put them in a single pair of handcuffs. Kerem jokes, "You said you'd never run to the airport for any guy." Ashley laughs and replies, "You should never take everything a girl says so seriously." And with that, the movie comes to an end. It's a classic tale of love, misunderstandings, and the lengths we go to for someone we care about. Just as cliché, but undeniably heartwarming. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and comment. I bring many such movie explanations, so subscribe to my channel and hit that bell notification icon. Stay tuned for more exciting content.